Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric on our long-running series, The Unported Playlist, where I take a look at my favorite unported arcade games of all time, and today we have Solar Assault. And I know what you're thinking if you've been a long-time viewer of my channel, but Video Game Esoteric, you've already covered Solar Assault once. That is true, I did a little over 2 years ago, but at that point in time, you could not complete the game under emulation in MAME, because it would freeze on like the 4th level. Thankfully, MAME's been updated, and you can now see the entirety of Solar Assault from start to finish on your computer. Before I get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and all that jazz. But let's get right into the game. This is an offshoot of Gradius, or Gradius, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Leave me a comment down below and tell me how you do, because people always have firm opinions on that. And versus being a 2D shmup, this is a full 3D, almost like an isometric viewpoint, but not quite. It does have a very strange screen space in which your ship centers itself, and you can kind of move around a central pivot point. But it is spectacular that this game is now able to be completed in MAME, because finding an arcade PCB for this is damn near impossible. I'll talk about that in a little bit. We'll talk about the game first. Because I love Solar Assault, it's running on the GTI Club base hardware for Konami. I don't know if that's the official name for it, but that's what System 16 has, and GTI Club being the first game that came out on that hardware, it usually takes the moniker if there is no name. But going right into it, this game is fun, it's intense, and it's a nice, refreshing experience compared to a regular shmup. Obviously you have horizontal and vertical shmups, 2D and 3D shmups, but this screen space isn't unique to Solar Assault, but it's relatively unique to the shmup genre, and I absolutely do enjoy it. What I really love about this game and this hardware in general is just how it looks. This is colorful, it's punchy, it's poppy, there's enough polygons to make every model look like it's supposed to, but it is still janky and pixelated enough to hit that sweet spot of mid to late 90s 3D jank that I love so much. And I especially love it when it's janky Konami 3D, because it just has that vibe I'm going for. And if you take a look at the graphical stylings, it kind of has what feels to be the polygon count of something like Nintendo 64, but the textures are not anywhere near as muddy. This kind of feels like half a Dreamcast or 1.2 Nintendo 64's duct taped together, but that looks like a fire dragon, and that is good enough for me. It just makes me happy to see this 3D in motion, and it's so much fun to be able to finish the game. Now moving on to stage 3, I should tell you that there's a second version of this game. There's this one, Solar Assault, and then there's Solar Assault Revised, which changes up the level structure, some of the ordering, and adds a couple different components into the game. And thankfully that one can also be finished on MAME now. I'll probably do a video on that maybe at the back half of the year when you forgot about this video. But if you can't tell already, this does link to Gradius, even though it's a loose connection, because we have Moai heads, and that is good enough for me. But I love how this game plays with 3D. You don't need to destroy the Moai heads, you can 100% fly around them, and as you get to this area here, the game is teaching you that you're not just going to be dealing with shooting enemies and not hitting the wall. You're going to have to be navigating that 3D screen space up and down, left and right, to avoid things like pillars and other environmental hazards, and that is a fun component to the game, and as you play it more and learn it more, it becomes second nature. Now, is this the type of game that you could 1cc? Maybe if you're really good, but when we get to the final level, and I'm going to run that in its entirety, you will see how incredibly difficult this game gets towards the end. But in the middle stages, I mean, I can get to like stage 3, if not 4, without using a continue, and that's not too bad. That's like 60-70% of the way there to that 1cc. But this game just has so much charm and personality, even with this Pharaoh head here. He's got these big white dead eyes, it's almost uncanny valley, and he's got his little beard chin extension as well. It's just such a fun look. It is incredible, and I love to see it, and it is a fun boss. You will see though, once you get to the outer edges of the screen, it can sometimes be difficult to aim your shots, because what you're pointing at is not always what you're shooting at, because there is a slight canted angle to where your ship is in the corners versus where the shot is going. And interestingly enough, Konami did this same thing with another game, one of my favorite shmups of all time, Tobey Polystars, also an arcade exclusive release, with that same sort of pseudo 3D screen space. But as good as this game plays, as incredibly janky and amazing as it looks, the game also has an absolutely incredible soundtrack. So go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds or so, and I'll come back and talk more about the history of Solar Assault. Enjoy! Just an awesome classic Konami soundtrack, and they don't get as much credit for soundtracks as I feel like they deserve. You hear stuff about Taito and Zuntata, and they have incredible music, but the Konami composers did an awesome job as well. Now the fun thing about this is the fact that it didn't used to emulate, and the GTI class hardware is all across the board as far as emulation is concerned. Solar Assault and Solar Assault 2 didn't used to emulate. GTI Club still has a glitch in which the handbrake will automatically apply itself, basically making it unwinnable. And the jet ski game seems to run completely incorrectly. It is running way too fast on my system. The only game that used to work perfectly fine is Operation Thunder Hurricane, and if you want to talk about janky 3D, oh, does that take the Konami crown. But again, you get to see the back end of a demon and move right into stage 5 speed demon. And let me tell you, once you get to stage 5, this game just gets flat out hard. I am playing this on normal difficulty, and if you dial it up to hardest, I wish you the absolute best of luck trying to beat this game, because I can't lie to you and say that this is 100% based on skill. Your skill definitely matters, but when there's so many bullets on screen at once, the 3D screen space does become a bit of a hindrance, because sometimes you will hit things that you don't think you were actually touching, and other times you're going to swear that you hit something and it didn't actually affect your ship whatsoever. The amount of brain training it takes in these later levels to understand exactly where your ship is can be quite difficult, especially when you try to center back in on that screen. And you will see there's just so much stuff going on the screen at once. But it is handling it at a full 60 frames a second, and this is just running off a PowerPC 400 base series CPU with some custom 3D chipset on it. After this, after M2, Konami is going to move over to using 3D effect chips, but PowerPC was their CPU of choice for basically everything 3D until you get to console hardware, and it was a smart choice because this game just absolutely rips. But you will see here again, good luck missing all of this. I missed like half of it, but the game immediately throws you right back in. Now I will say too, I have changed the test menu settings for this. By default, if you die and run out of all the lives, you gotta go back to the beginning of the stage. That becomes near impossible. So if you're playing the game and that's driving you nuts, go into the test settings and allow continue from death for all stages. You'll be fine. But even with that, beating some of these bosses, hitting their weak spots, you get a 99-second timer, and on these later bosses, I find that more often than not, that timer runs out, which is a perfectly applicable way to play. If you're not dealing for score, you can 100% just time that clock out and move on to the next stage. It works perfectly fine. But if you're actually trying to beat the bosses, trust me, some of them can be absolutely mind-bogglingly hard. But now we're on to the final stage, stage 6, Solar Assault, at least in the normal revision. If you're playing revised, things may be different. And this is just an absolute sea of projectiles. And this is what I mean when I say this game gets absurdly hard. And to illustrate that point, I'm going to show you this level from start to finish, just so you see exactly what you're looking at if you do want to 1cc this game. And in about a minute or so, I'll give you one last taste of the soundtrack, because I do love the level soundtrack here. But this game just looks beautiful. All of these neon blues, these oranges, everything going on, this dark screen space. This game has a mood and a vibe, and I would say, even though I'm a huge fan of Gradius, I think the vibe and the overall setting of Solar Assault may be my favorite thing Konami ever did in that series. But as we get further in, you see that we're navigating all these bullets and doors start to close. It's just funneling you into the smallest spaces ever, and you have to deal with that navigation as much, if not more so, than actually shooting your opponents. And honestly, I really like it, but like something like this here, trying to avoid the projectiles almost becomes a guessing game. And that's what I mean when I say, because of how this game treats 3D and sort of the perspective, it can get just a little bit difficult. But normally the corners are usually safe, and you'll see here I slightly missed that door, but it just gets intense. Things are going to go faster. You need to start going through these different areas. In some ways it has a slight Star Fox vibe to it. But again, I told you I'd give you one more taste of the soundtrack before we get to the final area in this game. So go ahead and hustle for like 45 seconds or so through this Mission Impossible style laser grid, and I will be right back. I just love that soundtrack. It's so intense and it has that sci-fi vibe, and the intensity 100% perfectly matches what's going on the screen because the bullets are coming fast and furious. Now, why wasn't this game ported? It's very simple. The PlayStation 1 or the Nintendo 64 100% couldn't handle this at the time, and by the time hardware existed on the home market, something like Dreamcast that could run this game was like 3 years old and people probably ignored it, because this seemingly didn't do very good for Konami. And why do I think that? Well, one, there's not that many arcade cabinets around anymore, and two, finding an arcade PCB to buy is near impossible. I've been looking for over 3 years to buy a Solar Assault board, and the closest I've gotten is a cabinet for sale in Ohio that they want $4,000 for. I don't have the space for it, and I can't buy a $4,000 cabinet to harvest the PCB. I've seen one broken GTI Club for sale that had graphical issues, and if it didn't have graphical issues, I would have converted it over to Solar Assault. But I'm highly assuming this just didn't sell well for Konami. People were probably expecting more 2D Gradius, and they got Solar Assault instead, and maybe that didn't hit so much on the market because this was still in the transitional period of 3D. Konami hadn't been working with it that long, and honestly, some ways Solar Assault shows that. But it is just a ton of fun, and I'm so happy that this finally works in MAME. Maybe it worked last month, maybe it worked 6 months ago. I didn't check the release notes, but I go back to games that I can't finish or play and check on them to see if they're working, and it's so good that this exists in MAME now, because if you do know of an arcade cabinet, tell me about it in the comments, because I have never seen one, and if I ever find one anywhere near me, I will bring the $40 worth of quarters it'll probably take to see the finish. But yeah, that Solar Assault, it's an absolutely spectacular game and I love it. But I will have more videos that unported every Monday until I probably give up on this channel, because I don't even know how many I've done at this point in time. But if you do know about a Solar Assault cabinet out there, please let me know. There's something beyond this little eye, but I can't show you right now. Maybe you should play the game yourself. Bye bye.